Imagine a man who spent his entire life proving that God is not just a matter of blind faith, but of pure reason. A man who took the ancient philosophy of Aristotle, infused it with the Christian revelation in a way that still shapes the church today. His name is Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas has made me think very deeply about a lot of different issues. And in this video, we're diving into the most profound claims of the Angelic Doctor. Ideas so powerful they earned him the title Doctor of the Church. From proving God's existence without the Bible, to showing why faith and reason are not enemies, to revealing the hidden structure of reality itself maybe. These aren't dry academic ideas. These are truths that can change how you see God, the world, and yourself. So let's dive in. I do want to take 1 second to mention that this is a very small channel, and I would really appreciate any love, any support. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, drop a comment below. Who would you like to see me talk about next? Who do you want to learn about next? Let's dive in. Thomas Aquinas was born around 1225 in Italy. A brilliant young man from a noble family, he shocked everyone when he joined the Dominican order instead of becoming a powerful abbot or politician. He studied under Albert the Great, absorbed Aristotle, who had just been rediscovered in the West, and produced an intellectual masterpiece, the Summa Theologica, a massive work that tried to explain everything about God, humanity, and salvation. Highly recommend reading it. But here's what makes him profound. He didn't pit faith against reason. He showed that they both come from the same source, and that's God himself. Thomas Aquinas, his most famous contribution is his 5 ways, 5 logical arguments for the existence of God, and they were drawn purely from observing the world around us. The first way was the unmoved mover. Everything that moves is moved by something else. And if you trace that backwards, you can't go on forever, and therefore there must be a first mover who is not moved by anything else, and that's what Aquinas would call God. A simplified version of this kind of goes like this. It's things change, whatever is changing is being changed by something else in the relevant respect. Many changes involve a hierarchical series of causes operating simultaneously. So a stick moves a stone, a hand moves the stick, muscles move the hand, and so on backwards. In such a series, each member has causal power only because it receives power from something prior, right? If every member derived its power from another member and there were no first source, then nothing in the series would have any power to act, right? So therefore, there must be a first source of motion that does not itself require being moved by something else, right? So that's what he would call the unmoved mover. It does make sense if you think about it deeply. And the crucial step is not merely that like every effect has a cause, therefore there must be a first cause, right? Like classical philosophers knew that like an infinite temporal regress was conceivable. Instead, they're arguing that like certain causal series are essentially ordered or hierarchical. So the claim is that in such a series, the causal activity of later members depends right now on a first member. An analogy often used for this is like a train car moves because another car pulls it. That car moves because another pulls it. If there were no locomotive providing the pulling power, then no car would move, right? So therefore, first cause, uncaused cause. The argument claims reality as a whole requires something analogous to the locomotive. And this kind of dives right into his second way that he claims you can prove God, and that is that there is a first cause, that every effect has a cause. Nothing causes itself. Again, no infinite regress. Therefore, there must be a first cause, an uncaused cause, right? So from there, we're just going to dive right into the third way, which is possibility and necessity. And Aquinas basically argues that things in our world don't have to exist. They're contingent. But if everything were like that, at some point nothing would exist. Yet things do exist. So there must be a necessary being whose existence is not dependent on anything else, which would be God. It can be put sort of simply, really. It's that many things could fail to exist. You know, you didn't have to be born. Trees die, stars burn out, houses get demolished, right? These are all contingent things. They exist, but they don't have to. If everything were contingent, then everything could at some point fail to exist. Aquinas argues that if everything can fail to exist, then there would have been a time when nothing existed at all. But if there were ever absolutely nothing, then nothing could start existing later, because nothing comes from nothing. Yet things do exist now. Therefore, Aquinas concludes that not everything can be contingent. There must be at least one thing that cannot fail to exist, a necessary being. He argues that this necessary being is what we call God. And a good analogy for this is, if you imagine a room full of lamps, each lamp is powered by another lamp. And if every lamp gets its power from another lamp, you can ask, where does the power ultimately come from? Aquinas thinks that there must be something that has power in and of itself, not borrowed from anything, right? It's not borrowed from anything else. Similarly, if every being receives existence from something else, there must be something that has existence necessarily, not dependently. So let's talk about the fourth way, and it's called degrees of perfection. We see things that are more or less good, more or less true. These degrees point to a maximum, right? The source of all perfection, and that is God. It's better to help an old lady cross the street than to kick her and make her fall on the road, right? Like that's objectively true. Like that points to some transcendent arbiter. It points to an objective moral standard that's built into reality, right? So if some things are better than other things, then there has to be a maximally great thing, traditionally called summum bonum. Others would say God. It's funny, in Jordan Peterson's debate with Sam Harris, he said that God is the greatest value in the hierarchy of values. And I want to quote you guys something. I want to quote to you what Jordan Peterson defines God as when he's debating Sam Harris about, is it reasonable to believe in God, so on and so forth. In Jordan Peterson's debate with Sam Harris, he tries to bring God down to earth as much as possible for people who struggle to try to understand what God would represent in their lives or what God is, the definition of God, right? You got to define it in the best way you can, although I don't think that God is fully definable. I do think that he is something that is out of our grasp in a sense. Jordan Peterson goes on to say, God is how we imaginatively and collectively represent the existence of an action of consciousness across time. I want you guys to really pay attention to this because it's an extremely profound definition of God. Very, very, very deep thought that Jordan must have put into this. He said it is how we imaginatively and collectively represent the existence of an action of consciousness across time, as the most real aspects of existence manifest themselves across the longest of time frames, but are not necessarily apprehensible as objects in the here and now. So what that means in some sense is that you have conceptions of reality built into your biological and metaphysical structure that are a consequence of processes of evolution that occurred over unbelievably vast expanses of time, and that structures your perception of reality in ways that it wouldn't be structured if you only live for the amount of time that you're going to live. And that's also part of the problem of deriving values from facts, because you're evanescent and you can't derive the right values from the facts that portray themselves to you in your lifespan. Which is why you have a biological structure that's like 3.5 billion years old. God is that which eternally dies and is reborn in the pursuit of higher being and truth. That's a fundamental element of the hero mythology. God is the highest value in the hierarchy of values. That's another way of looking at it. God is what calls and what responds in the eternal call to adventure. God is the voice of conscience. God is the source of judgment, mercy, and guilt. God is the future to which we make sacrifices and something akin to the transcendental repository of reputation. Here's a cool one if you're an evolutionary biologist. God is that which selects among men in the eternal hierarchy of men. So men arrange themselves into hierarchies, and men rise in the hierarchy, and there's principles that are accordant that determine the probability of their rise. And those principles aren't tyrannical power. There's something like the ability to articulate truth, and the ability to be competent, and the ability to make appropriate moral judgments. And if you can do that in a given situation, then all the other men will boat you up the hierarchy, so to speak, and that will radically increase your reproductive fitness. And the operation of that process across long expanses of time looks to me like it's codified in something like the notion of God the Father. Now, I find that extremely profound, and I think Jordan's onto something. I do think that all those patterns represent God the Father. And with this, I do want to dive into Thomas Aquinas's fifth way. The fifth way is design or final cause, right? And things in nature act, his argument is basically that things in nature act towards ends. Even non-intelligent things like planets or acorns, this intelligent ordering points to an intelligent director, which would be God. So things in nature regularly achieve specific outcomes. And examples would be acorns grow into oak trees, not giraffes, right? Planets follow predictable paths. Seeds develop according to their species. Physical laws produce consistent results. And nature seems to behave in orderly, goal-directed ways, right? Many of these things are not intelligent. An acorn doesn't think, right? A planet doesn't decide where to orbit. A chemical reaction doesn't consciously choose its results. Yet these things still behave in regular, predictable ways. So, basically, it's that non-intelligent things can't aim at goals by themselves. So Aquinas argues that something without intelligence cannot direct itself toward an end unless it is directed by something intelligent. His analogy is an arrow. An arrow flies toward a target, but the arrow itself doesn't know where it's going, right? The arrow it reaches the target because an archer directs it. Therefore, there must be an intelligent director. And since natural objects seem to act toward ends despite lacking intelligence, Aquinas concludes that there must be an intelligence behind the order of nature, right? This is natural law. And this intelligence is what he identifies as God. And I want you guys to leave a comment below. What was the most persuasive way, so to speak, that made you really think deeply? I would really like to hear that. I would really appreciate a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.